convene at 3:02, I believe it is. Roberta, you want to call the roll?
Are you there, Roberta?
Roberta's not there either.
Well, I guess not, but I can call the roll.
All right.
Director Thilke?
Here.
Director Daddy?
Here.
Director Finch?
Here.
Director Weirick? Not here yet. And Director Hages?
Here.
Okay, we've got a quorum.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is public comments on items not appearing on the agenda. So if there's any public that would like to speak, now would be the time.
Yes, that might be me.
Okay, go ahead.
Well, I'm Julie Tumamayat Stensley, Tribal Chair of the Barbareño Ventureño Band of Mission Indians. This is my first time on the meeting. It was kind of serendipitous. I met Roberta at the Green Coalition Relatives with Roots program out at Clough Vista Park on Saturday. And just on that same day, I get a call from Jordan Keir that they're doing the monitoring for the groundwater out there on South Fulton. So I was out there with him day before yesterday, and I'm just kind of going out there and checking in, but they're progressing down to their 300 feet. I only watched the first 5 feet of him hand digging. It's adjacent to the Weil Academy in that area for cultural resources. So that was one of the reasons the city, I guess Alma, had told him that this was one of the requirements for the project. So I went out and everything was clear. And we did hit some of that really dark clay black soil that looks exactly like midden soil minus the shells and artifacts. So it was clear of all that, but it made us kind of both go, So it was nice working with him. And so after that point, I really didn't need to be there any further, but I did go and spot check just the core samples that they had laid out. And you guys, it looks pretty good. I'm really glad to see it, this time of year with no rain, that it was looking pretty positive and that we still have water in the ground. So I guess ending that, and I'll end there. I just want to listen in, is that, talking about that percentage that will go back to the earth, back to the environment and the natural resources that are out here in our valley. And, with all the water issues, I knew this was coming. I'm always looking for rain and praying for rain and observing. And I'm just seeing, we're not going to have much luck this year either. I'm watching the oaks and acorns. Anybody interested in gauging those visuals out there last couple of years? So sorry, you'll get snow, but you won't get rain. So we'll see what this fall. I think it's going to be pretty much the same. But anyway, just want to thank you and thank Roberta for letting me chime in. So that's really all I have to say. Thank you.
Julie, would you please make sure Roberta's got your contact information?
She has my email. She has my email,
I want to make sure we get you on our stakeholder interested party list.
Sure. Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Julie.
Thanks, Julie. Are there any other public comments? Okay, hearing none, we'll move to the next item, which is the sustainability plan update.
All right, you're up, Trey.
Thanks, John. Appreciate it, Chair Hages. Our update currently is that we're expecting to have draft chapters 1 and 2 over to staff next Friday, June 18th. We've had our internal peer reviewer go over those chapters, and we're just making revisions now. So next Friday, we expect to have those chapters over to John, and if John gives the thumbs up, he can go ahead and release the first 2 of 5 chapters to the board for their review and comment. And then John has put together, with my input, an outreach and communication plan draft schedule, which is included in your agenda today. And this provides proposed additional workshop and meetings to provide information to stakeholders for the GSP. In July, that we're proposing to have for the first 2 chapters, chapters 1 and 2, and also an introduction to chapter 3, which is the sustainability management criteria, an outreach meeting or workshop for the GSP. I think that'll be pretty important for stakeholders to have that information available for them to provide pertinent input. And then in August, we're proposing that we will, at the regular board meeting, start discussing identification of projects and management actions. We'll have a short list for the board to review, and then allow for the stakeholders to identify potentially other projects and management actions that we'd like to discuss in the GSP. And then in September, we'll provide additional information on projects and management actions based on input from the stakeholders, and further planning involved with describing those actions. And then the plan implementation is the final chapter, chapter 5. And that really is a cost to implement the plan. So it's a high level cost of monitoring activities and potential projects and management actions that may incur during the 20-year implementation period. And a lot of the driver for this schedule is that the plan has to be in DWR's hands on January 31st, 2022. Interestingly enough, there is no requirement in SGMA to have a public comment period as part of the adoption of the plan, other than having a 90-day notice of your intent to adopt the plan, and then you have to have a public hearing where you accept comment from your stakeholders at that particular meeting. Most basins have elected to do a minimum 30-day comment period to inform the draft prior to adoption. But that is completely voluntary. And then once you submit an adopted plan to Department of Water Resources, they have a required public comment period. So it's something to consider in the one basin where I've done this already. Interesting that we had, this initial draft comments. The plan went to DWR, and then DWR released it, and we had a second round of comments. And basically, I would say 90%, 95% of the comments were just redundant to the first round of commenting we had. But it does allow the stakeholders to have that additional touch and input in informing the plan. So I think it's just the board should consider whether or not they want to have a 30-day comment period prior to the draft and prior to the public meeting, which would likely be held in December in order to adopt the plan in time for the January 31st, 2022 requirement. So with that, I'll take any questions on the schedule.
Can I chime in real quick before the board has questions?
Of course.
Part of what I tried to do with this is show you your regular meeting dates. One of the problems with, if we get into the regular meeting dates for bringing this information out to the public, which I would be fine with, but the city has the Arts Commission typically at 5 o'clock following your meetings. And so I guess one way to deal with that is to hold your regular meeting at an earlier hour in those days. Otherwise, you might have to look at holding these outreach events on special meetings. So I'd like to get some feedback from the board on that. And then the other thing is, November, December, typically consolidate the regular meetings, usually to early December, because of the Thanksgiving at the end of November. Just take a look at that. We don't have to make all the decisions on this today, but we need to get some direction going so we can start these outreach events. Thank you.
John and Trey, could I ask a question on this proposed calendar?
Please.
Sure.
So I'm looking at this thing. I've highlighted everything. It says we're going to do this after 90 days. We're going to propose this. One of my questions is time. So Trey, you've said you've already done one of these things. How long should we expect a meeting to last? Because we're already looking at capped at 5, but I mean, if the question get redundant as we get in, I mean, are we looking at 2 hours for each public comment and we have 5 or 6 different public comments? I mean, I'm looking at that January 22nd meeting and I don't like the way it's looking. I like to work things backwards. And so I'm wondering, when we don't have mandatory 30 days, we don't have mandatory 90-day waits, we have gaps. I would like to see what we can do to move these things up. I don't like to get cramped in the holidays.
Right.
I don't want to take a chance on having a meeting, find out we got a power outage that day and we're sliding down, which we do, right?
Good point.
Come on, it happens. So I'm not a last minute person. I would like to get this stuff in the box and put a proposed calendar all the way through and make sure, as the chair said, can we make sure that we're not bumping up against Casitas time so they don't have 2 a day? And then let's get realistic. Is there anything holy about Wednesday that we can't accomplish on Tuesday or Thursday where we don't have this time constraint? I mean, I like flexibility and allow things to go. If you're telling me that the meetings are going to go 2-3 hours, then Wednesday's an issue with the arts. If you're telling me it's not a big deal, that's fine. So I would kind of like to see some type of a mocked up of calendar when we can go in there. And I want to make sure that if we miss a meeting, you start getting into November, December, things just start naturally happening. They really do. And so I really don't want to go down to where, hey, we're in December, then we decide we want another 30-day period. And that, I'm assuming that January 22nd is a hard date. Trey, is that correct?
Yes, the January 31st, 2022 date is a hard date. So we've worked back from there. The 90-day notice is simply a notice to the public that you're going to hold a public hearing, likely in December, to adopt the plan. And then, I think the idea is that we're going to release these chapters incrementally to the board, get comment back from the board, and introduce all the concepts for each chapter to the stakeholders, and begin soliciting input from the stakeholders as we're developing the plan to make sure there's no big surprises. So when you get to that, December, you expect to have received most of your stakeholder input at that point. You might have a few folks who come out at the last minute and make comments on the plan, but I think all the information and materials and concepts are going to be presented to the board and stakeholders prior to that meeting. So if they've been involved with the process, they should know what's going on. Some of these meetings in other basins that I've worked in have gone 3-4 hours just because there's a lot of stakeholder input. I would say overall, the attendance of the meeting so far and the input so far has been limited. We certainly can craft the presentation so they're closer to less than 2 hours and provide time for public comment. That certainly can be arranged. So we're here to create a process that works for the board and the stakeholders.
So Trey, how long after the directors get their chapters, let's say 1, 2, and 3, what's the lag time after that the public will get theirs? What my experience has been was that 8 years of flow is that we didn't have people that went ahead and read, were prepared, knew anything. What they did was they came and they asked the same questions, and they weren't prepared with a single bit of information. And so, what they wanted us to do is start over from the beginning every one of the 20 meetings we had. And, I just want to make sure that they've had an opportunity, if they're actually interested, to take a look and have some type of preparation. So after the first meeting, those people, we can say, this is when you're going to get the information for the second meeting, and we'd like you to, take a look at it so we can hit the ground running. Won't happen on the first one, but it could certainly happen after the subsequent meetings. So if we could.
Bob, I think I've been watching the Upper Ventura River doing their plan, and they've already done several chapters. There's a lot of the chapters they're not going to be controversial, and there's not really any input at all. I mean, some of these meetings we've had on the Upper Ventura River, there's been no questions. The board members ask questions, but other than that, there haven't been many. So I think we could pick. I think we know which areas are going to be controversial and which areas people are going to be interested in asking questions, and make sure we have enough time for those and get these other easier ones out of the way as fast as we can. I mean, some of them we may be able to do several of them in one meeting. I don't know. But I think that the key is how quickly Dubeck is prepared to do this.
Right.
That's the key. We can't go any faster than they do.
Oh, that's what I was going to ask. Do they need the 4 weeks in between, or could they come to 3 weeks in between? Or 2?
That's a better one. Thanks, Jim.
Yeah, we're prepared now to overwhelm you all with information with these first 2 chapters. I mean, they're pretty dense, and it's going to take you some time to get through them. Presuming the comments are pretty minor, we can turn these the first 2 chapters are in really good shape. We can turn them around pretty quickly once you guys submit comments. But we'll be providing, executive level summaries in a sort of like a PowerPoint format that folks can review, so they can really just get a high level summary of what's going on in each chapter and what are the main points, so they don't have to dive into the hundreds of pages of the GSP, because you can get into the weeds really quickly. And I know what I can say. Bob's concerns are relevant. I certainly have been involved where everyone wants to start from the beginning every meeting, and you have to make them realize that there's already been a lot of information provided. So I like to pull out those slides and have those available so people can review them quickly, and we'll put those together for each chapter with the high level concepts, and that way hopefully if they're going to pick up, someone might jump in after 4 of the chapters have been presented. That way you can provide them with the slides. They can do their homework a little bit and get up to speed quickly. But we're prepared to start turning this stuff around really quickly.
Trey, one other question before I go off on that same tangent. If we're not ready on the 31st of January, what is the protocol for that? I mean, I don't want to freak out about a whole bunch of stuff and then find out that, hey, well, do better next time. Okay, well, we'll see you next month. I mean, I don't know if it's a hard stop. I don't know how hard stop it is on that date. What are the ramifications for failure to get that thing in January 31st?
I would not recommend that. The ramifications are ultimately that at some point it goes, instead of the Department of Water Resources being the oversight agency, that the State Water Resources Control Board would step in and, potentially prepare your plan for you. We've gone through all the sustainability indicators, the 6 main indicators. we don't see, there are some data gaps, and there might be a little bit of controversy surrounding groundwater dependent ecosystems and groundwater surface water interactions, but we have data gaps there that don't have to be solved by January 31st, 2022. We're going to have recommendations to collect additional data, do further monitoring for those indicators, and we don't see any reason that you would have to hold up the plan. We think that you are going to push some of the monitoring and some of the potentially development of sustainable management criteria to after the plan, just because we don't have the data. And this is the case in multiple basins, but I don't really see a reason at this point to want to push beyond that date.
Trey,
Okay, well, I was just interested in what the state's remedy is if you do it. That's all. There's a lot of times where people kind of go overboard trying to make a date and it doesn't end up being as relevant as they think.
Bob,
So I'm just
Bob,
wondering.
let me chime in real quick. I attended a session a couple of years ago put on by Department of Water Resources, and they said, yes, if a basin doesn't do their plan, then the state can take it over. And like Trey said, it more than likely it'd be the State Water Resource Control Board. But we got a couple things going for us. I agree with Trey. I doubt very seriously we're going to go past that date. But, number one, the state was very delinquent in getting back to us relating to the alternative that OBGMA prepared. And I think we could certainly beg for some forgiveness if we were a month or two late. On the other side of it is it's going to take the January 31st is a hard date. It's in the legislation. So it has to be done by then. But I don't think they have any remedies other than taking over the agency. There's no fines that I'm aware of. And so I think if we came in and for some reason, which I like Trey, I doubt it's going to happen. If we have a delay, then I think we notify them, we'll tell them we'll have it to them in so many days and move forward.
well, let's proceed with the idea we're going to be on time.
Yes,
I think it's a little premature to worry about that right now. I'm more concerned whether or not they accept what we submit. I think we don't have on this draft schedule, we don't have anything until July 29th. Is there any way, that's what, 6 weeks?
Yep.
What can we get done in the next 6 weeks?
We get 5 chapters done.
Another one?
There's no reason why we could not have a meeting earlier in July, chapters 1 and 2, just to and that way we could have maybe shorter meetings that don't go, endless hours, less information. So we certainly can make that happen. I would think if something's early July, it's more likely to be a teleconference and maybe not in person. But if we want that as an option, DUDEC is available to proceed under that manner.
Okay. So early July, you don't think any earlier than that, Trey? If we wanted to try and do something maybe in the later part of June?
Certainly chapters 1 and 2 we're more than prepared to present in the next week or two here. So if we want to do it in June, we're happy to accommodate.
Okay.
I would say let's do it if we can get a meeting time.
Yeah, the big issue is if you wanted your regular meeting, I got to check with the city about the Arts Commission. But we can do a special meeting just like this and we get it noticed. And I would also recommend that we publish something in the Ojai Valley News about these events so the public sees it. And then we send a letter to all the stakeholders, interested parties, and the pumpers.
John, would you like to have me have a reporter contact you so you can give them an article outlining what you'd like to announce to the people? Would that make it easier?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay, I'll do that. I will have Perry contact you. By the way, it looks like from the 4th of July till the 13th of July, I'm going to be out on vacation. That's why I'm sensitive about
Okay.
our time. I just hate to lose time we have. That's all.
Well, let's assume we can do those first two chapters by the end of June. What's up next, and how quickly can you do that? Can we do a middle of July?
Certainly. Next would be identification of any projects and management actions we want to consider in the plan during implementation. And I think that's where you typically get more stakeholder input. We would provide kind of a list of projects and management actions that are being considered in other basins that are appropriate for Ojai, understanding, some of the projects that have been considered in the past. But that's where often you get stakeholder input. So I think that would be an important meeting, certainly get stakeholders involved with.
I think that's what I would prefer we do that. And if we run into a problem, then we have more time to address it. Because my concern is we get some very difficult comments and we don't have time to address them properly. They're going to ding us. So anyone else have any problem with that? I mean, it's basically every 2 weeks or so until we crank out most of this.
I agree. Every 2 weeks, as long as Dudek can keep up with that pace, we'll get it through.
So you want me to try and schedule something within a couple of weeks?
Or what about use June 30th? Because that's basically, that's 3 weeks. But we've got to get these first two, and then after that, hopefully they can start throwing the chapters out.
Yeah, you'll have a regular board meeting the 24th. We could do June 30. I just need to check with the city of their availability.
John, is the arts meeting on the 24th again at the same time?
I don't know. I think the last 3 board meetings that I've coordinated with the city, they've said we had to be done by 5 o'clock on that Thursday because our arts commission meets at 5.
They're going to go dark for a couple months in the summer.
All right.
And
all right.
so
Well,
if
I'll
we
check
could
with the
clear
city.
that out and take their time, that'd be great.
Okay.
Yeah, that's true. I think the city does go dark in August. I think Casitas cancels some meetings too. So we might have August might have a lot of room.
Okay. All right.
Can I add something? Sorry, gentlemen, and women. Sorry, I'm doing a July, no meetings.
Oh, thank you, Betsy.
Sure. Sorry to interrupt.
Okay.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, I think if we could I'd like to get through these steps that we have to get through so that we can identify any problems early. And I think having, as you said, a 30-day comment period, I think is helpful because it gives us time I've seen, it's like environmental reports. The thing you get dinged on is you get a comment that you don't adequately respond to and you wind up getting sued. So the more time we have to respond to those comments and contact the people that have a concern, I think the better off we're going to be.
Okay.
Chair Hages, if a board agrees to have that 30-day public comment period for the GSP, we can build that into the schedule. So I think it would be good to get a decision on that today or by the next board meeting so we can go ahead and build out a schedule to meet the January 2022 deadline.
Anybody have Go ahead.
Yeah, why don't you just build out kind of a schedule now that you've heard this, mid-end of month meeting, and then they can firm up the dates, John and et cetera, confirm it and see where it gets us to.
Okay.
Did you get that, Trey?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Any other comments on the schedule?
Just a quick question. We have a regular meeting on the 24th of June. We need to do at least the normal business transactions. I would suggest, well, it's up to you, Trey, if you have any thoughts. Do you want to try and have 2 meetings where you have a GSA, groundwater sustainability plan update on the 24th, and then a meeting on the 30th? Or just keep it all to the 30th?
I think if we can cover some of this stuff in a regular meeting, we ought to do it. You get it done.
I think we certainly want to present the schedule on the 24th. So this updated schedule that shows all the potential workshops and meetings that we want to cover. I'll put a slide together so everyone can understand the dependencies and milestones that we need to meet the deadline, and solicit some comment back on the schedule to see if there's any revisions and proceed from there.
Okay, great.
All right. Okay, anything else on this schedule? Any other comments on anything else?
I think, Trey, were you going to talk about potential groundwater dependent ecosystems?
Yes, we have a 12-slide presentation to provide the board and stakeholders about our initial findings for potential groundwater dependent ecosystems. And we also just have some updated subsidence information from Department of Water Resources that was released in the last month to share with the board. Devin, do you want to advance that next slide with the INSAR data?
Yeah, so everyone can see the slides?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so as Trey mentioned, going to be discussing groundwater dependent ecosystems today. But first, just have a quick update on the land subsidence. Recent data was released, recent INSAR data for an additional year of data from October 2019 to October 2020. And so we analyzed that, created a figure shown here. And what we can see is it's showing a similar trend as we observed looking at the 2015 through 2019 data, that the center portion of the basin is showing some land surface increase between October 2019 and October 2020. It was about a 1/4 inch, while the peripheral edges of the basin have been relatively stable or have subsided slightly. So when included with the previous data set, the entire data set from 2015 to 2020 shows the central part of the basin has risen about 1 inch, and the edges of the basin have subsided about 1/4 of an inch.
That was just some informational data here. Again, our conclusions to subsidence haven't changed, that it really doesn't appear to be an issue in the basin. Based on our previous presentations, we haven't been able to develop a direct correlation basin-wide to groundwater levels, but it certainly appears that there's some tectonics at play at the edge of the basins, and that we might be seeing some elastic rebound in the central part of the basin when we're recovering groundwater levels. Are there any questions on this quick subsidence update?
My only question would be, what's the margin of error on those measurements?
We should be reminded that this is satellite remote sense data. We don't have, this data hasn't been ground truth, so it's really a high level screening. If you wanted super accurate data, you would have benchmarks in the basin, but it's really a tool that's used to determine, do you have an issue? And overall, review of all the data, the satellite data, is indicating that subsidence is not an issue currently or historically in the Ojai Basin.
Right.
We'd have to get back to you on the exact uncertainty with these measurements.
You've answered my question. Thank you.
Sure.
I'd like just to, for the record, Roberta, Mayor Betsy Stixx is the alternate representative for the city of Ojai, and she's present.
Thank you, Chair Hages. Devin, do you want to go ahead and present some of the potential groundwater dependent ecosystem findings?
Yeah, just making sure we got all the questions answered. So moving on, presentation will be on GDEs. So what are GDEs? GDEs, groundwater dependent ecosystems, are defined under the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act as ecological communities of species that depend on groundwater emerging from aquifers or on groundwater occurring near the ground surface. GDEs include wetlands, streams, springs and seeps, terrestrial vegetation. They are important in that they provide social, economic, and environmental benefits that include their ability to improve water quality, support biodiversity, and provide places for recreation. GDEs can vary in ecological value depending on the botanical and biological species present, their degree of dependence on groundwater, and their vulnerability to changes in groundwater conditions. Groundwater dependent ecosystems can in general range from being entirely dependent on groundwater or obligate groundwater users to being somewhat dependent on groundwater or facultative groundwater users. However, the determination of the degree of dependency is difficult and requires significant study. The extent to which GDEs may be adversely impacted by groundwater extraction depends on the GDE's degree of dependency on groundwater, the location in relation to pumping wells, and the hydrogeologic setting. So as shown in the diagram on the right, GDEs located away from pumping wells at the edge of a groundwater basin where groundwater levels are more stable or less likely to be impacted than GDEs, say, located adjacent to pumping wells in the center of a basin. The local lithology, the hydraulic connectivity between shallow and deep aquifer zones, water quality, and numerous other factors influence the extent to which GDEs are affected by pumping. So to determine the location of potential GDEs in the Ojai Valley Basin, the natural communities commonly associated with groundwater dataset, or NCCAG dataset, was reviewed in GIS. The NCCAG dataset is a compilation of 48 state and federal agencies' data, including the U.S. Forest Service, U.S. Fish and Wildlife, and California Fish and Wildlife, among others. The dataset includes wetlands and phreatophyte vegetation. These are deep-rooted plants that commonly rely on groundwater. So in the Ojai Valley Basin, the data set identified 38 individual vegetation communities and 8 wetland communities that may depend on groundwater, totaling about 250 acres in total. The dominant vegetation type is identified as coast live oak, Quercus agrifolia, comprising about 62% of those mapped communities. And the dominant wetland type is palustrine scrub shrub seasonally flooded, comprising about 1% of the data set. So this map shows the location and type of vegetation in wetland communities that may rely on groundwater in the basin. The vegetation types include coast live oak, riparian mixed hardwood, river Sidian, alluvial scrub, valley oak, and willow. And the wetland types include various palustrine, seasonally flooded, scrub shrub, and forested wetlands, and riverine unknown perennial, unconsolidated bottom, semi-permanently flooded. So to identify which of the vegetation and wetland communities in this data set are potential GDEs, these 46 individual map communities were aggregated into 11 larger GDE valuation units by stream or stream reach. The mapped communities within each of those GDE valuation units shown in the previous slide were then characterized following the Nature Conservancy's guidelines for identifying GDEs. This involved a desktop review of the NCCAG dataset alongside measured groundwater levels, precipitation data, aerial photographs, lithologic data, and vegetation health indices derived from Landsat satellite data. The Landsat data, including normalized derived vegetation index, or NDVI, and normalized derived moisture index, NDMI, are indices that provide a quantitative measure of a vegetation greenness and moisture content, and long-term variations in NDVI and NDMI act as a proxy for habitat health. So the NDVI and NDMI for each map community were plotted alongside precipitation and groundwater level time series data, as shown in the graph on the right. And the relationship between each of the variables was evaluated visually and by running a correlation. A correlation coefficient of 0.6 was selected as the threshold for identifying whether the relationship between two variables, for example, groundwater levels or NDVI, were correlated or not. If the vegetation health indices were positively correlated with groundwater levels in the principal aquifer, and groundwater levels measured at nearby wells were shallower than 30 feet below ground surface, the ecosystem was characterized as a potential GDE. Additionally, if there was insufficient vegetation health data or site-specific data to characterize groundwater conditions, the ecosystem was also characterized as a potential GDE. On the other hand, if groundwater levels were not correlated with NDVI or NDMI, the ecosystem persisted during periods when underlying groundwater levels were much deeper than 30 feet below ground surface, and there was geologic evidence of a purged aquifer system. The ecosystem was characterized as not likely a GDE. So again, two different characterizations: either the ecosystem was identified as a potential GDE or not likely a GDE. And then further, ecosystems that were characterized as a potential GDE and located near active production wells where measured groundwater levels have historically shown significant declines during dry climatic periods were identified as ecosystems that could potentially be impacted by groundwater production. So these would be priority potential GDEs is what we are calling them. Now, with all that, before we get into the results of the analysis, it's important to discuss the limitations of the analysis and data gaps. The analysis described was purely a desktop evaluation of existing data to begin the process of identifying GDEs in the Ohio Basin. Field surveys to verify and refine these results have not been completed, and there are a number of data gaps that exist. Some of the data gaps include limited site-specific groundwater levels, lithologic and streamflow data, and an evolving understanding of the hydrogeological conceptual model of the basin. The analysis did not take into account the possibility that some of these ecosystems may be artificially sustained by irrigation return flows, that the changes in vegetation health may be due to more highly opportunistic non-native species replacing native species as groundwater levels decline, or that some of the ecosystems may largely consist of developed agricultural or urban land and not groundwater dependent wetlands or vegetation. This analysis does, however, provide an initial understanding of where additional resources and time should be spent identifying GDEs and the ecosystems that are most likely to be impacted by changes in groundwater conditions. So based on available data and the analysis described, there are 33 potential GDEs in the basin, totaling about 200 acres. The majority of the potential GDEs are located along the margins of the basin, as shown in the figure. These are located on the alluvial fans at the southern flank of the Topatopa Mountains. These ecosystems are shown in yellow on the map. Current groundwater production in these areas of the basin is not significant, and groundwater levels in these areas have remained relatively stable over time. Therefore, the potential GDEs shown in yellow are not likely to be impacted by groundwater production. Remaining potential GDEs, 12 total with a combined area of approximately 94 acres, are located near the perennial reach of San Antonio Creek in the central part of the basin. These are the communities shown in purple on the map. Vegetation health trends for these ecosystems are positively correlated with groundwater level trends, and groundwater levels underlying the ecosystems have been shallower than 30 feet below ground surface. These potential GDEs consist of coast live oak, riparian mixed hardwood, willow, valley oak, and river Sidian alluvial scrub, palustrine scrub seasonally flooded, and riverine unknown perennial unconsolidated bottom semi-permanently flooded vegetation and wetland communities. Groundwater may support these ecosystems, and there's potential for the ecosystems to be impacted by groundwater production. So this figure shows the vegetation communities along the edge of the basin in the Senor Gridley Canyon area. So these would be vegetation and wetland communities that have been identified as potential GDEs, but in an area of the basin not likely to be impacted by current production. As shown in the hydrograph for well 32J2S, groundwater levels have been relatively stable and over time. This is a zoomed in figure of lower San Antonio Creek, where Fox Canyon, Drain, and Seward Canyon tributaries enter the main stem. And so this figure shows these vegetation wetland communities along this perennial reach. Several of these ecosystems have been identified as potential GDEs that could be impacted by pumping based on their location and available data, the trends we've observed. And as shown in the hydrograph on the right for well 12H2S, groundwater levels have shown some declines during dry climatic periods, particularly during the last drought between 2012 and 2016. Although the magnitude of the water level fluctuations in this well have not been as significant as other wells in the central part of the basin, such as Key Well 58LS. So in summary, this desktop analysis identified 12 priority potential GDEs and provides an initial understanding of where additional time and resources should be focused. However, data gaps do exist that need to be filled prior to development of sustainable management criteria for GDEs. Work being completed in the basin by various entities currently can be used to inform the development of these sustainable management criteria for GDEs. But for now, it is recommended that groundwater levels continue to be monitored regularly and in combination with the Landsat data be used as a proxy for GDE habitat health. And as additional data and information become available, it can be used to inform the development of the sustainable management criteria for GDEs in the future. And with that, we'll be happy to answer any questions.
Does the board have any questions?
I'm going to ask a boring question. When you go back to the map and what you show is the perched water map, you show that northern perimeter, and we're talking about water depth. Well, okay, but there was one prior. There's one prior to this. That was a different map. And I'm watching the little bottom there, getting some information. Does the perch water correlate with the clay cap at all? Is there any correlation between the perched, the clay cap underneath at 25 feet, and then it gives us a layer of clay? Any correlation at all?
Absolutely. Yeah. This is Jordan Kerr. We're obviously in the middle of drilling this depth discrete monitoring well, really to get the biggest handle with subsurface data on that. But there's absolutely that correlation. The base of the perched aquifer is completely correlative with the top of the clay aquiclude that is several tens, if not over 100 feet thick, in the area of the depth discrete monitoring well we're drilling right now. So the extent of that clay stratum and the extent of the perched aquifer are nearly one and the same. And if you think about it in a layer cake model, the clay aquitard or aquiclude is the cake, and the perched aquifer is the gravel icing on that cake. And it's pretty extensive. And that line that's shown in the demarcation is the approximate extent of where we see that to be significantly thick and correlative throughout that south portion of the basin.
Okay, and okay, thank you for putting that back up. Now, with that, I'm going to make a statement. We're not getting a lot of percolation into the aquifer because that clay is so thick, is my first assumption. And my second assumption, if we were to do some channel remediation like they've done in Agora Hills and a number of other areas and Los Angeles now, where they're getting the concrete out of these express, Fox Canyon, for example, is just a big box semi-tunnel of concrete to express water. Would I be correct in saying if we remove that, we wouldn't expect any percolation because of the thickness of the clay in that area, and we'd continue to always have a separation of surface water?
From what we understand today, if I can take the liberty to answer that question, removal of urbanized structures that limit the infiltration of surface water into the aquifers would certainly help maintain the health of the perched aquifer system, but it would not necessarily affect the health or induce infiltration into the main production aquifer systems because of the separation of that clay.
Okay, but that could significantly help GDEs.
Absolutely, yeah. The perched aquifer is much more correlative to these GDEs, except for the far north purple one on the current graphic, where I'm scratching my head about that one because we see depths to water significantly deep there, and while there may be some vegetation there that induces that, I'm wondering why that shows up as a GDE when I believe there's some pretty deep depths to water there, right, especially in the wells at the San Antonio Creek spreading grounds, and right near the corner of Karn and Thatcher, just south of Ladera Road. But we'll get there.
Where is that? I mean, from this map, I would almost say it's in an area that's farmed.
Same.
Yeah, it's where Drawn Creek enters San Antonio Creek.
Yeah, but that's farmed.
Yeah, it's
the depths to water
community of Coast Live Oak. So it's not a wetland. It's Coast Live Oak trees, which have rooting depth up to 30 feet. And so review of the vegetation health data and depths to water, there have been depths to water measured in this area shallower than 30 feet. I don't have those wells right here shown, but they were included in the analysis.
Yeah, because there may have been a peak in a well that's, as you know, Jim, part of the farming operations there. But I think most of the water levels in that area tend to be much deeper than 30 feet. And the coastal live oaks there probably would be fine just with the soil moisture that is.
Well, you know what? It's next to an abandoned orchard. So they used to get some irrigation, and that orchard's been abandoned for 25, 30 years. I think that's now I'm thinking it's, yeah. Okay. I was just curious where it was, and I think I know what it is now.
Yeah.
I think we should also emphasize that these are potential GDEs based on a desktop analysis. So based on this additional information, we likely, classify that more as a potential, not a priority. This is really meant to understand where we should focus resources. And so certainly that additional local knowledge is certainly important to incorporate. So we'll take another look at what wells we have in that area and maybe take a better look at aerial surveys. Again, we haven't gotten on the ground to see any of these locations. So the information that you provide is really going to be informative to revising these figures moving forward.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good to understand.
Any other comments? Go ahead.
Chair Hedges, I was just going to say that overall, I mean, it really directs our focus for potential GDEs to one specific area in the basin, primarily associated with the San Antonio Creek and the outlet from the basin, and that these potential GDEs that are on the alluvial fans below the Topa Mountains and also other areas in the basin are unlikely to be impacted by any sort of groundwater production. So I think it's really timely that this multi-depth well is being drilled today, because this is the information that down the road is going to allow you to better manage that habitat. We'll determine what information is available for preparation of the groundwater sustainability plan. But our initial thinking is that we do not have sufficient data at this point in time to develop any specific sustainable management criteria. And typically, groundwater levels are used as a proxy to manage these GDE systems. So we're not thinking that with the information we have today, and obviously that's evolving real time, that we're going to set any sort of or recommend any sort of criteria in the GSP. And it's really something that is going to evolve during implementation of the GSP.
All right, thank you. Any other comments?
So you might have said it and I missed it. What is that hash mark line on this chart? Yeah,
this line here.
Clay.
That's the start. That's where you think it starts, or you know it?
Yeah, to the southwest would be the area of perched aquifer, and into the northeast would be the area where it tapers off and it no longer is present.
Yeah.
All right, any more comments from the board?
But can you call me back in about half an hour?
Mute, Peter.
Peter, you need to go on mute.
Okay, thanks.
Are there any comments by the public? Any questions? Okay, hearing none. Trey, thank you for the presentation. It was very interesting. And it doesn't appear that we have any significant problem with this area, which is nice. Okay, is there anything else?
No.
All right, if I don't hear anything else, then I think we're finished with the agenda. Thank you for everyone for participating and listening to this. And thanks, Trey and Devin, for the information. It's very interesting.
So now, when should we expect the first couple chapters?
Friday, right?
Right.
On
Okay.
June 18th, we'll provide them to John, and if they give us the thumbs up, they can send them out to the board. If they have any specific comments they want us to address before they go to the board, we're happy to do that.
Okay. So we should put them on the 18th.
I'll get them out to you as quick as I can.
Okay.
Are these going to be electronic files?
Yes.
Yes, we can provide a Word document and a PDF of all the figures, and we can provide a PDF of the entire chapter. So if you prefer commenting in digital format and Word, that's probably the preference for us. But certainly we can provide you whatever format you require.
Just send both.
Will do.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, anything else? If not, we are adjourned at 4:03. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.